Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and for more than 20 years, I've been working with accounting professionals to help them start and build successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax businesses. This podcast is dedicated to helping you actually run your business and be profitable, successful, offering quality services, and getting paid what you're worth. Each episode that we have, each and every week, is with experts, bringing them on to address various topics that you need to consider as you're running your company. It's here that we're going to cover topics ranging from marketing to selling, pricing, onboarding clients, tech stacks, and such things as even mental health. And today is going to be exactly that. It might be perceived as perhaps being off topic, but you'll clearly find that it is not. We're going to have a wonderful discussion here with Dr. Tim Thayne. Dr. Thayne happens to be someone that I've gotten to know over the last little while, and I'm very impressed with some of his work. It's basically working with teenagers and, most importantly, his business perspectives as it relates to not only running his own company, but his thesis as well. And so I'm going to dive into that with him, and I'm excited to have him on the show. So, Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Roger. I'm excited about this conversation we're going to have.
Well, one of the things I'd like to start with is kind of get an idea of your background. I know that when we were discussing earlier your doctoral thesis, you were explaining how you kind of tied family and business together. Tell us a little bit about that and what drew you to that.
Sure. You know, I come from a small town in northeastern Utah, and I can't say that our culture was really priming me for higher education.
Okay.
But in the end, I did end up getting into college. I went to BYU and got my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then I went on to Virginia Tech and for a PhD, thinking that I wanted to be a professor somewhere.
Okay.
And I learned pretty quickly that there's a lot of pressure to publish and to do research. And I can't say I had a lot of talent in that area or interest. And
Okay.
so I was still trying to figure it out, even, at that point. But one thing I did know is that I really believe very strongly in family. And I wanted to do something to strengthen families. And I also had a little business in me. I wanted to do something around business. So I was stuck. I was on this track of marriage and family therapy. But part of me was thinking I should have done organizational psychology or,
Okay.
Something like that. And I had this idea. I thought, families are a human system, a really intimate human system. And another human system is organization. That's a business organization or any organization is made up of people that have roles, they have relationships, they need to interact and learn how to work together and live together. And so my dissertation was actually taking the models and theories I was learning in marriage and family therapy and applying those to business organizations. And so I had one foot in one side, the other foot in the other. And I was really fortunate because my dissertation chair, he was very open. He said, go get the people you think you need to help you with this. And so I had a professor from the Management Engineering, College of Management Engineering, business person on my dissertation, a statistician, and then my MFT professors. And so we created a program called Solution Focused Leadership. And I had the opportunity to work with a lot of leaders. And by virtue of my passion, which was families, even though I was working with them as leaders in a large healthcare system, was one of the places I worked, half of my time was working with them around their marriages, their relationship, their kids, their extended family, their mental health, and then bringing that to work. And how do we, how do we take what we've learned in one place and transfer it into another? And so that was an amazing experience for me.
Well, the thing I like about this dissertation and how you kind of melded the family and the business together is the fact that whether we're accounting professionals running our businesses or we're working with clients of ours that are likewise running their companies, the culture that we're building within our organizations really comes from this familiar type of experience. We're spending so much time with these people at work, perhaps in many instances more time with them than we do our families. And so that structure, that organization, that interaction, we've got to have healthy ways of interacting, coping, and motivating individuals. So whether it's family or business, I think a lot of these traits really apply. So I'm excited to dive into this. So how did you find that the marriage and family, let's say, principles actually applied in business? How did they manifest in business?
In family systems, if you boiled it down to its like smallest component part, it is the individual, but then it's that individual in relationship with one other individual, and it's a dyadic relationship. And there's something that happens between them, and that happens in families, that happens in businesses. And you can sit back. I'm kind of a people watcher.
Uh-huh.
I always have been, and no wonder I kind of gravitated to the field I did. But I always look and see what's going on between people because there's lots of rich stuff going on right there, and if you can start to, and I think one of the things I really hope that your audience can hear from us today is that of all the things we could be doing that would move the needle on all fronts, I believe that creating deep, meaningful, connected relationships are that is one of those things. The 80-20, I'm thinking about your audience. They know numbers and they get this, I'm sure, this 80-20 principle, which is that 20% of the things you do really account for 80% of the success or the happiness or the goodness. And I think developing relationships, getting good at it, and deciding that you're going to push yourself in that realm, whether it be at home, resolving issues with your family relationships, or at work, building trust there so that the voluntary aspects of what people bring to the table can be brought to the table or not held back. That to me is one of those golden nuggets that we could go for.
I love it. Well, there's a few things that I want to kind of tap into. One, there's a lot of talk of dysfunctional families. And with dysfunctional families, I'm going to now equate that to dysfunctional businesses. What are some of those key components that exist between the two? The other thing is leadership. When you're running a household, there's a certain parenting type styles that you can have, but there's also managerial type styles that you can have. And if you tend to favor one, you're perhaps going to implement it in both settings. The other is success. Success comes with sacrifice. And a lot of times what someone sacrifices in order to be successful sometimes is lamented. It brings about guilt or regret. And in business, where you're dealing with many entrepreneurs that are striving to be so successful, we sometimes neglect things because we can't be everywhere and all things to everyone. And therefore, something's giving. And as we run our businesses or work with our clients and help them run their businesses, there's going to be conversations, I believe, that typically come up where some sacrifice was given, and it's a question of, did I make the right choice? And so there's a lot of things I think we're going to be covering. So let's start, first of all, with expectations. Maybe not so much in the traditional family today, but you as a parent would typically have expectations via chores and so forth that you would anticipate that the family members would contribute to the household. Well, likewise in business, there are expectations. Everybody plays a part. Everyone is essential to the success of the company. Everyone needs to do something. How do those two correlate? How do they manifest similarly?
That's a really great question because that's right. In both cases, there's a role. There are expectations that go with that role. And, I think that, in families, a lot of times we're not real clear about the expectations. We tend to think, oh, they should know. Our kids should know. We've said it before, and they should know that they should take the garbage out every morning or whatever it is, or make their bed. And so I think there's a lot of assumptions that we make in families that we don't do in business, where we're very careful. You think about all the trainings people have had for their business roles. They'll pay a lot of money to go to a conference, to get some training, to get some coaching, to learn how to be a better employee or a better manager or a better leader.
Develop skills.
To develop those skills. They'll set meetings on their calendar to actually work in their business. And how many times in families do we have a regular meeting to deal with the business of family. We leave that to chance a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And so that's one of the things that I think are different in normal families versus what we do at work. We tend to get really clear about what the expectations are, and we follow up for the manager or the leader. We follow up on that, make sure it's been done, and we hold people accountable.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of what we do. But at home, it's a much less like that. And then you throw in mental health issues, and you know, if you have a child that's got anxiety and they're really struggling with things and they're kind of retreating, and your emotional thermometer is kind of plugged into them, now all of a sudden you're feeling so much for them that you let go of expectations because they're having a tough day. And we want to smooth the path for them and make it easier for them because life is tough. You know, and in the meantime, if we applied a little bit more of the business logic here, we'd realize that that's actually going to keep them from growing. And
In fact,
probably,
we might be enabling.
yeah, it could be enabling, and probably in the end, the child is going to feel less competent, less confident. And then ultimately, there's going to be conflict between you and them because now they're stuck and you don't know what to do. So I think a lot of things we do in business needs to be brought into the home because there's a lot more intentionality usually happening
Yeah.
in business. And a lot of those principles really apply at home.
You know, one of the things that I'm hearing as I'm reflecting on some of the family things I've tried to do is family planning, having that weekly meeting where you're actually figuring out who's going to be where during the week and what are the plans in the next month or two as to what we're going to be doing together as a family so everyone's schedules can be aligned. And the thing that's fascinating is so many of the families today are so busy with extracurricular activities, you know, sports and so forth, that everyone's being pulled in various ways. You know, one of the family members might be the taxi for all the children. Well, that same coordination's happening in business, but it seems more intentional, more deliberate. And so what I'm hearing you say is we need to likewise manage the home accordingly. And when it comes to expectations, it's not necessarily true that giving the person that get out of jail free card, that pass on you have expectations here within the home. We don't do that in business. You know, we still have deliverables, we still have expectations, you still have a job to be done, and you either are or are not doing them. And it's not to say that we're not compassionate and having latitudes, but we don't absolve someone of the responsibilities when they're struggling in business. We might adapt a little bit, but in families, perhaps we absolve them of any responsibilities in the household, and all of a sudden they're in a situation where they don't have purpose, they don't have meaning. And that's, if anything, probably going to enhance this problem that they're having because now they're aimless.
Exactly. Yep. Being in business in a business role, you're a step removed. It's not like you're intimately connected. You know, I think family life is really it is the place to grow because it's the most difficult place. You know, if you think about it, when you talk about the dyadic relationship, those two people in a family, it's like they're dancing closely like this. And I'll tell people, you know, try to create friction from here. You can't. But you do it like this inside a family where the hands are touching tight. You're going to create friction. So it's a complex setting to apply the principles that we've learned in business. It's harder to do at home because of all the emotions, the intensity of the situation, the longevity of the relationships, the history, the baggage, the hopes for the future. It complicates it. But yes, if we could, you know, unplug that emotional thermometer a little bit from our child, if we happen to be that way, where we're triggered by every emotion they have, and could step into that almost that managerial role a little bit, in a lot of cases, our child will be better off.
Yeah, and the skills that we have in that business setting could be applied here and help us actually be better parents.
Exactly.
So I like that. This is going to be a great place for a segue because one of the things that I know I've seen with my clients and I've seen others' experiences, we're all running our businesses or working with business owners, is there's sometimes this challenge of I struggle at home, Therefore, I'm going to put more energy and time into business, and it's there I'm valued and appreciated more. Therefore, I start to feed this ego. I want to be in the business setting more often, so I'm going to stay later, work weekends, and avoid the family because there's chaos over there. But in reality, the people I'm dealing with at the office, I'm not going to know them as long as I know my spouse or my children. And so what happens is they start to be gravitating towards the successes of business and neglecting the home. There was a quote that I learned years ago that no success outside of the home compensates for failure in the home. So I see value in that. What would you say to someone who may be drawn to their business and recognizes, maybe I am neglecting my family? There's a sacrifice for success, but how do you help maybe manage or cope with that from a therapeutic side?
Mm. Yeah, first of all, I would say I understand, because none of us want to, it's the pleasure pain scenario. It's like there's pain over there, there's more pleasure, more success over here. It's really easy to find ourselves in this cycle of more and more of this because I feel successful versus and less of that. But if you think about the ramifications of that, it starts to kind of feed on itself because the more time and effort we put over here and neglecting the other side, the harder that's going to get, the more messy that's going to get, the more complicated that's going to get, the harder it is then to go reinsert ourselves back in and work on that. And so I would say it kind of goes back to that statement I made at the beginning, is that if we can decide that we are going to invest in our key relationships, and the family is definitely key, they are key relationships, and figure out how to deal with the challenges of that situation and deepen our connection with them, it's only going to make us better at work. It's a paradoxical kind of idea that if I will invest in others, kind of forget myself,
Mm-hmm.
that hey, I feel better over there, but start to invest in others that matter, it ends up coming back to us. It's just we're happier. We're if you think about almost from an investment perspective, investing yourself in learning how to deal with the complexity of the home life, it takes off a lot of the pain out of our life. The more we can solve those issues and get that going well, it's almost like taking that negative thing off the books.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot more energy and wherewithal to devote to the business as well. So it's paradoxical, but that's where we ought to put our effort.
One of the ways that I've learned to manage that and kind of understand my own needs is I assess the situations I'm in as to whether or not I'm present.
Mm,
If I'm present in the sense that I'm able to focus on the moment,
love it.
enjoy the moment, if I'm able to be engaged in the moment, then I feel that I'm healthy right now. I think things are going well. But whenever I'm in a situation and my mind is fleeting back to something in my past, regret, oh, I should have done that differently. I should have done this differently. Oh, I should have handled that better. My feeling is I'm dwelling in the past that's unresolved. I need to go address that and take care of it so I can now be present. And likewise, if I'm being in a situation and I'm not present because I'm thinking about the future, or I need to go home, I need to do this, something else needs my attention, because of the fact that I cannot focus on the now, that's my telltale sign that I need to go address that, so that that's resolved. It's calendared, it's scheduled. I've got it figured out as to when I will address it. That then enables me to now be present. And so my barometer is always, if my mind's racing and not attentive to the current situation, then something's out of whack and it needs my attention. And it's my litmus test to figure out whether or not I need anything, both personally, professionally, home, work. And, life has its ups and downs. Things happen outside of our control. But as those things occur, I can either say, oh, I've got time in an hour, I can take care of it so I can focus now, or I'll take care of that tomorrow, or I need to take care of that now and I need to postpone whatever I'm doing. Is this making sense? Is this resonating?
Totally. I love it. The therapeutic word that's used a lot for that kind of thing is attunement.
Yes.
And you're so right about that. I mean, if there's only one thing you could do is that, I think that would move the needle in your relationships, because if you are present in that moment, your eyes are locked on the person, you're hearing, you're not just trying to think about what you're going to say, but you're
Yes.
really truly sort of like, what are they trying to convey to me? And you're not elsewhere. And so you can bring your very best self to that situation. And when we do that, and I agree with you 100%, when we do that, we're able to really lift that situation, that person. We can be in a situation that our presence made a difference. So why would we want to go halfway with this? We're here now.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is going to go away, so let's engage.
Yeah, at the moment, let's stay with it.
Yeah, the attunement, that's very, very appropriate. And honestly, that self-assessment is what's helped me kind of adjust and adapt as needed, and it's allowed me to find happiness, so that's very important.
I love it. And if you add to that kind of staying in the moment and present, a knowledge of yourself, to understand, like you said, enough awareness, not just to know where are your thoughts right now, but also core beliefs that are driving a lot of your judgments that you're making in the moment, or the way you go about a relationship. So this is where I think, learning about and developing insight into yourself, insight into relationship dynamics, it really should be one of our major focuses for all people, because it ends up enhancing ourselves, our life, the people around us, our businesses, every which direction we look, it can be enhanced.
One of the things that I really appreciated you mentioning is having that foundational, here's how I make decisions. I think some people are aimless in the sense that they're not consistent in how they're making decisions. And so because of that lack of consistency, they're aimless in who they are as an individual. They're not someone that can be relied upon, that if in a situation they would act accordingly. And so as you identify, these are my foundational principles, this is my core of who I am, the decision-making becomes easier, and you know what you're going to do in situations before they occur. That really makes life, in my opinion, a lot easier to experience, because you're able to be true to yourself. It's one of those things where some people struggle. Are they being true to who they are? Well, once you know who you are, it's easier to be yourself.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and you can have that self-trust, and it starts there.
Yeah.
And then once you have that self-trust, you can develop trust between you and another person.
Yeah.
Because they can count on you. They kind of know how you operate.
Yeah.
How you're gonna react to this situation or that situation.
Yeah, because of the consistency of.
Yeah.
Yep, I like this. All right, let me take it another step further. With regards to business, many of my listeners, as they're running their companies or interacting with their clients, might find experiences where you were explaining earlier, we sometimes have disassociated ourselves from either the business as we've drawn into the company and we've neglected the business, or vice versa. We've been drawn into the business, become very focused on it, and neglected the family. And we realize we've done that, and we need to re-engage with either the business or the family. And these family relationships, how do you re-engage either with business or family? Once you realize I'm neglecting one and it needs a little bit of attention right now, how do you reassert yourself?
I think you start with what you were talking about before, like, what are my true values and vision for myself? And am I living that out? Am I out of whack here a little bit? And by the way, balance is a very elusive thing. It's one of those things. I remember when I was at Virginia Tech getting my PhD, because it was all about, for me, I had all this knowledge about family life, and yet I'm devoting so much into my dissertation and my PhD studies and all of that I was neglecting my little family. And I remember having this real dissonance in my life. Like, this is what I know, and this is my ideal, and I'm not living it. And if we have that, I mean, obviously it's sort of this it's this voice in our head saying it's time to make a change. A lot of people struggle, though, to have the courage to do that, to say, okay, I'm going to throttle back over here, or I'm going to give up something that I'm doing on my own and devote it, some of my personal time to this more important goal. And so I think it starts with checking in and saying, am I living true to where I want my life to go and my vision and my values? And if I'm not, what adjustments do I need to make? And you fall off the road on both sides. It's like you might have it for a little while. That balance might feel there for a while. Then you have to redo this over again, and it's a lifelong experience.
So I've got two things that I think illustrate this, and I'm curious what you'll think of both. The first is a visual. I'm aware of a meeting where someone was asked in the audience, asked of the speaker, how do you juggle all the many things that we have in life and be that husband, that father, that business owner? And he listed a number of these things. The individual asking the question was still in school. How do I also focus on my academia and such? And the answer was profound. He says, first of all, you don't. Something has to give. And you have to give yourself permission to let go of something. And the advice he gave was with a visual. He basically showed the analogy of someone who takes and puts a plate on a stick, and you have to keep it spinning, and you have to, with that stick, give it some attention. And as you go from one to the next to try and get that momentum going to keep the plate spinning on the stick, he says you can only have so many plates in the air. And what we tend to do is we tend to overwhelm ourselves. And he said, what you've got to identify is maybe those 3, 4, or perhaps at most 5 plates you want to keep up in the air. Therefore, there's a time and a season for all things. And understanding you don't have to be the best at everything at all times was, first of all, one of the ahas. And akin to that is I was having a conversation with a woman who runs a very successful multi-million-dollar business, and it was her recognizing she did not need to clean her house. She was willing in her mother role to recognize she didn't have to clean the house, and she was willing to outsource that and have someone come in as a maid service and clean the home, to do the laundry. And it was her recognizing that defining herself as a mother did not necessitate her cleaning the home. Mm-hmm. And so she could be a mother to her children and not have to be the one doing the laundry. And so she started to identify, I don't have to take care of the yard outside. I can have someone come do the lawn care. She started to recognize there are various roles that, as I define who I am as a mother, I can let go of these other things. And it allowed her to now find the time to do what mattered most, build a relationship with her children, work on building her business. And all of a sudden, it became easier because she started to give herself permission to let go of certain things. What are your thoughts on the plates and my analogy with that story?
I visualized all that, by the way,
Yes.
and saw a few plates crashing.
Let them
by
go.
the way, in my mind. It reminds me of I watched my grandpa. He's a hero to me. Probably because everybody I knew around me that knew my grandpa would say, "You are like your grandpa. You look like him," and I wanted to be like him. And I think the human reality, I think all of us inside ourselves, there's something trying to become inside of us. And we tend to keep life in just manageable difficulty, just barely able to manage the many difficulties that we're trying to tackle. And in different seasons of our life, we can handle more. And at other times we can't. And I love the idea of there are seasons, and there are chapters. And it's another way to look at it is sometimes you're writing the chapter on, academia and getting your PhD. And other times you're writing the chapter on a startup business, or, another chapter on our first child. And the first child comes, that changes your world and your life and your priorities. And then that chapter closes and another chapter opens. And it's that part of that just manageable difficulty process that you can't write all the chapters at one time. It is a lifetime of writing these chapters. And my grandpa, I watched it in lots of ways, but I think a visual is if you were to look at his gardens he had in his life. You know, I'm sure they started out no garden when he was little. As he got older and got married, he created a garden among many other things he was doing. In his prime, his garden was massive. It was like 2 acres large.
Oh, my heavens, that's large.
It was huge, and he was using, major, tillers to do it and all of that. And as he got older, I saw this garden start to shrink, and it went down and down and down. And he lost my grandma, and he was so independent. He finally was willing to move in with my mom and dad, and his garden moved into their greenhouse. And then I watched inside the greenhouse as it shrunk down to just one little corner of the greenhouse. And he was tending this little space, probably a 4x4 little spot of ground.
Little garden box.
Little garden. And that's what he did as he finished his life. And I think that he had to do that. He had to let go. And sometimes we're forced to do that. Other times we can choose to let go and make life more manageable so that we can bring our best to it.
You know, hearing you share that story, I think it reminds me of intentionality. When you plant a garden, you've got to begin by identifying how big is this garden going to be.
Yeah.
You don't start with the idea of an acre and end up with a smaller one, nor do you end up with a bigger one. You set the parameters, and you're going to work well in those parameters, and that intentionality is very important. It reminds me of a person, Brendan Burchard. He wrote a book, and in there he speaks of before you go into a room and cross that threshold into whatever meeting you're about to have, you have to identify what's the purpose of this conversation. What am I leaving behind? I'm not bringing anything else into this meeting. I'm coming in purposefully. But at the same time, I'm going to come in and identify before I step through the threshold, what's the purpose of this meeting? What am I trying to accomplish? And once it's done, it's over. And I really thought that was wonderful because as I would go home, before I came in the door, I would leave work behind, and I wouldn't walk in the door with any of the stresses or anxieties that I had at the office. I walked in with a smile on my face to greet my family with, I'm excited to be home, and I'm going to be here for you. And I didn't come home to, when my children were younger at least, to necessarily watch television or something. I wanted to come home and engage with them because I only had them for an hour or so before it was bedtime. And so I can do other things once they go to bed. I wasn't going to do them now. They needed my time. And living intentionally like that purposeful living makes life so much more fulfilling, I think, because I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
And that goes so tight with your awareness of the moment. Am I present?
Yeah.
Because you got the intentionality as you walk into it, and you're staying present in that intention all the way through. And I think that that is amazing. Not to promote my podcast, but it's called Not by Chance, and that's exactly what it is. It is really about intentional family living.
Yeah,
and we don't have good outcomes by chance. It is from being very intentional about those relationships and as many of the conversations as we can. We're present, we're intentional, and that we have a goal in mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go now into a stage of your career where you started a business, and I've got some questions about that because I think my listeners will appreciate this, and I'm sure they may have seen something like this. You started a business out back where you were actually doing wilderness survival with teens that were troubled teens, let's use that phrase. And what I wanted to do is have you describe what the business was, but I'm more interested in, from an entrepreneur point of view, a parent point of view, what are some of the signs that maybe someone can keep an eye out for to avoid needing to have an intervention and send a youth off to such a program?
Yeah.
So let's describe what you are a specialist in, but I want to talk about how can we avoid getting to that point? What are some of
Yes.
the things we can pay attention to in our households and with our employees that if we're just a little bit more observant, we can address these things before they become such a tragedy? So talk
Yeah.
about
Well,
Outback.
thank you for that question. I love to think about Outback and my experiences there because it actually was such an amazing experience for me. And basically, we were working with teens who were struggling with anything from serious oppositional behavior, drug use, anxiety, depression. Basically, their life was shutting down, and parents had tried everything. They'd tried, the self-help route. They'd tried therapy. They'd tried all kinds of things, and these days, it's evolved a little bit to where it's most of the parents, end up before an intervention like that happens, they've probably visited the hospital. I mean, that's how serious it is. It's like emergency room cases
Suicide is what
where
you're referring
life
to.
threatening
Mhm.
or life is, their possibilities in life are really being thwarted,
Mhm.
and there needs to be some serious intervention. And what we'd see, we had a very relationship-based wilderness program, and we had some amazing field staff. And the whole goal was you pull the child out of the environment they're in where they're stuck and where they're in conflict with their parents and they're resistant to everything, and you put them in nature. And talk about a reset, an opportunity to sort of completely clear the plate. And it'd take a week or two most of the time, but at that point, after a couple weeks, the teen is starting to reflect on their life. They come in angry at their parents. They're upset at everything that's going on. They're not taking any responsibility. And after 2 or 3 weeks, they're like, "Wow, I was such a jerk to my parents. Man, my life was going nowhere." And they're able to see that, for the first time. And so you'd see this incredible growth happen in their awareness. And they'd start to set goals again, and they wanted good things out of life again. Um, and we'll probably get into this later, but there's a challenge. Once you do that in a unique setting like that, nature, how do you transition that back into the real world where all that complexity still is waiting for you when you get back home? Um, so the early intervention, kind of going back to your question, the it really goes to, it's almost like if you had a brand new piece of equipment. If you're in construction, you've got let's say a new backhoe. Uh, you would never think to run that thing into the ground without maintaining it. It's an expensive piece of equipment. You know that every morning when you get up before you go dig a trench, you're going to grease it. You're going to put make sure that those joints are working. And it's really the same thing with mental health and family life, is that early indication if there's any signs of this or withdrawing from society a little bit or spending way too much online or just they're edgy all the time, you need to pay attention to that and to attend to it. And the early intervention in my mind for a parent with a teen that's struggling like that would be to nurture the relationship like crazy.
And what does that mean? What does nurture mean?
It means that becomes the priority, where you're going to make sure there's a connection being built.
Okay.
And it might be fairly simple little things you do, like make sure you make eye contact every day, smile at them, give them a hug, tell them you love them, ask about their day, just connect in as many ways as you can. And some of those things are 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And some are, might take 30 minutes. And I'd literally make a list of all the ways that I could connect with my teen. Because now's the season, right? Speaking of that, it's like you're seeing that, okay, priorities need to shift a little bit. They need you more. And you have to attend to that. So I'd start with the relationship and figure out, okay, they're spending a lot of time on this gaming system. I wonder if I could learn a little bit about that and understand their world a little bit.
Yep.
And I tried that, and it's very humbling. My kids killed me with the gaming. I mean, I tried to join them in a game, and They're trying so hard to show me how to use the controllers and
Yep.
everything. I was so clueless, but it was a bonding moment for me, even though I was the weakest guy on the team, you know. But I think that's what we have to do as parents, you know, figure out where are they at, and let me go to them
Yeah.
and find them.
So I'm going to add to that because as a parent and having had teens, I can relate to that, and I'm going to share my experience. Yeah, as teenagers, they start to acquire interests outside of what you would find interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and they, in their identity, find things that are things that they want to pursue. Well, the first thing is to show interest in those things, not because I'm liking them, but I know that it's of importance to them. Therefore, I'm going to be curious about it. And just the fact that I'm curious and I'm asking just genuinely interesting questions to understand what they're looking at, it causes them to realize that I'm interested in them. And so
Yes.
that's the first thing. The second thing is I learned this years ago, and it's the value of the human name, the individual name. And so what I learned is, yes, you named your child, but you need to use that name in an endearing way. And that nurture that you brought up is very important, because if they can hear you speak their name in loving kindness, that you're not yelling their name in a scolding, they're in trouble. You're saying their name with love and endearment. That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you were explaining, communicating and talking to them, engaging with them, use their name. The most valued possession that anyone has is their name. And then the third thing I would add to that is being aware of who their friends are. I think one of the things that I've observed, and I learned early on never to do this, and I didn't, is when my children came into the home, into the room, it was to acknowledge their presence, say their name. But when they came in with friends, is ask who the individuals are, get to know them by name. And when they come into the home, I want to use that individual's name and welcome them into the household. And at the same time, when they're leaving, I want to say goodbye to them. That's powerful because
Mm-hmm.
it's acknowledging their presence, and all of a sudden they become individuals. And too often I've seen in households where the teenagers, particularly, even the son or daughter, are coming and going within the household without acknowledgement. And that is horrible.
That's
And
right.
so,
Yeah.
one of the things that I would add to this as a way of nurturing is helping them see themselves as individuals that are valued and noticed in the home.
I'm just picturing those friends that came into your home, and you paying that kind of attention to them and using their name and all of that. I'm picturing them leaving saying, "Your dad is so cool." Now think about the benefit of that. Now they've got a friend who's on your side, who is promoting you to your kid,
That's right.
and who will probably want to support you if you had concerns down the road. You could go to that friend, and you could share some of your worries. And I've seen that a lot. We've worked with a lot of families where kids are coming home from treatment programs, and one of the things that we try to do is help surround them with people who care. And I'm thinking about one unique situation actually happened here in Utah, where a boy was coming back from a wilderness program. I went into the home. We were going to have this home team gathering to welcome him back and have this group of neighbors and family and friends come and support him and say, "Hey, we're here for you." And he had one friend that actually had introduced him to marijuana in the first place and to other drugs, uh, who was kind of on the C list, like, no, we don't want that kid being our son's friend when he comes home. But I think the parents had been very kind to this boy, in spite of the fact that he wasn't the best influence on their son. So when the son was coming home, they invited these other people to come to the home team gathering that we were going to have. And this boy found out about it, this friend, and he went to the mother and he said, "I'd really like to come to this." And the mother poured out her heart. She said, "We are so worried about our son. You know where he was at a few weeks ago. Well, he's been in this wilderness program and he's made all these strides, and he's got the light back in his eyes, and he's ready to make a change in his life. We're really worried that if he gets with you." and you're doing these drugs and stuff, he's going to fall right back into it. And so I'm sorry, we can't invite you. But it was done with love and kind of some kind of respect. And a couple months later, the mother gets a text from this friend who was not invited. And he said, you need to know that Josh just came to me and asked me if I could get him some drugs. He sacrificed his relationship with his friend to support the dreams and desires of the parents. And an interesting thing. So I strongly agree with the way you treated the friends. You can't always pick the friends your kids bring home. And we'd like to sometimes. We'd love to see some of them cut out of their life. But I think that's an example of where that respect really came through for this family. And I saw it in a lot of cases when they were open about, here's what we're trying to do. Can you help us with this? Can you be a good influence with our son or our daughter?
That's powerful. Yeah, one of the things that I've recognized is friends can really sway anyone. And there's a statement out there that you are the embodiment of the 5 people you associate with most. Well, when you're teenagers and you're running around with a group of individuals, it's very clear who's influencing you. And so I think that's a powerful statement that I don't think we give enough credence to. So
yeah, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier on, is that those key relationships, and our kids are the most key. We have to have a solid relationship with them, especially as they're going through the adolescent years, because our influence is going to wane. Because of the other outside influences that are coming in at that point, and we want as much as we can get. During that time.
Yeah, at the teenage years, hopefully the correct principles have been ingrained enough that they can govern themselves. It's too late to think you're going to influence them otherwise.
Yeah.
You can affect them, but the influence starts to wane at that point because
right.
they are who they are at that time.
Yeah.
So let me dive into a few things that I know you have a lot to say about this, and I know it affects business and family. It applies in each. And so I'm going to go down a list of things that you know better than I do, but let's talk about them. And first of all, it's the importance of structure in both the family and in business. Having defined roles, having organization, expectations, and we'll get into expectations. But let's talk about the structure side of things. What can you say about that?
It's really interesting. When I was going to start a company called Homeward Bound, which was to help transition these teens home again, they're coming from a very highly structured setting in a treatment program, that's been well defined. Like, here's what our day looks like. Here's what the academics look like. Here's when you're going to do therapy. These are the rules of the program. Is how you have to abide by these rules. And you're getting a lot of support and all of that. So they're coming through this highly structured setting, in a lot of cases, to a very low-structured home, and maybe even chaotic home. And so the research was very, very clear that the best outcomes for kids coming home entailed having a structured environment that they went to. That there was a bedtime, there was a get-up time, there was time with family, there was expectations that are clear about how they're going to live their life and so forth. Around technology, around curfews, around computer use, all of those things. And so what we'd do is we would try to structure the home. We'd figure out what it was and say, okay, we need to literally go into homes, and we did this with thousands of families over a few years, and we'd look at their environment, both the physical layout of the environment, the culture that you mentioned. What's the culture like here? Is it just willy-nilly and kind of, not structured? And then we would try to put that in place for the family so that they didn't have this free fall off this cliff almost into a non-structured setting. So what you're saying is actually research-based. It's absolutely true. There needs to be that kind of support around them.
Related to this is something that the veterans experience. many people that are actually in the services, they have a very structured life. That structure does give them some identity. It obviously complements the brotherhoods that they're creating. But then when they leave the service, they're aimless. And with that lack of structure, they start to flounder. And so I'm very much a believer in structure. At work, the expectations of having a clean desk, having a clean office, taking out the garbage. I mean, there's certain expectations that evolve into a cultural expectation of the individual. This is how we do business around here. So likewise in the home, in business, that structure starts to set the expectations, which brings me to expectations. What can you say about expectations as it relates to family or business?
First of all, they need to be clear expectations, and sometimes we think they're clear and they're not, and so a lot of times it helps to write them down. Inside families, there's lots of different kinds of expectations. Chores are one level of an expectation, but if you've got a child that's really struggling with something in their life, there's something that raises way above the idea of a chore. It is we stay clean and sober, in our family, and that's an expectation that you don't do that. And we're going to drug test you. We're going to follow through and make sure that one expectation we're giving it the support it needs, whatever that is. And so if you think about families, you've got, a one-time task that might be a checklist. You've got a chore that's a recurring expectation, small little job that you do every day or every so often. And then you've got these big ones. And I think one of the best things that parents can do and leaders can do at work is to identify all the expectations and then name them something different. What's the critical, expectations? And that might be key success factors at work, and what's that look like when we are living those expectations, and what happens if we're not? What's the downside? In the home, a parent might say, "This is a critical expectation. We really expect this," and then when we don't get that, a lot of parents will not do anything about it. I mean, there's no real downside. And a lot of kids these days, what they do is they don't believe that is an expectation because it's never been backed up that way. It's never been, reinforced that it is. And we call it sort of the Vegas principle. If you went to Vegas and you played blackjack or something and you lost, but the guy at the table didn't take your chips, there was no downside, why wouldn't you do it again?
Yeah.
You just keep playing, right? And that's kind of what happens for a lot of kids, that parents will state an expectation and not really follow through with what they said. And the reason they don't do that a lot of the time is they've either created an expectation that's crazy and is not possible because they did it when they're angry. They said it in the moment, the heat of the moment, or they just simply were very, very unclear about it, and so they never really set it. They don't set really realistic, clear expectations, and then they don't create the choice that should go after that and the accountability that should go after that.
This is huge. I really appreciate you bringing this up. So let me kind of restate this, reframe it, and see if I get this. Because I do wholeheartedly agree. In business, I refer to as key metrics. It needs to be quantifiable. You need to have something that is black and white. It's either done or not done. There's no ambiguity about it. So that clarity really helps with the expectation because there's no confusion as to what's expected. So that's the first thing. And in family, that's wonderfully important. The second thing is getting very clear as to the consequences of it, the accountability. So if I don't, what's the result of this? And you've got to be consistent with that. And the consequences need to mirror the expectation. You can't have something very minor with a a very egregious outcome. You've got to kind of temper these things. So as it relates to home, just to give you some ideas, I remember a very important video that was done. It was a commencement speech by a Navy SEAL, a commander of the Navy SEAls, where he speaks.
I think I recently listened to that again.
Yeah, he makes the bed. He talks about the value of making a bed. And here you are thinking of servicemen, men and women who are going to go out there in defense of the country. They're going to take people's lives. That's what they're being trained to do. Those are the skills they're developing. And the best thing they can do in the beginning of the day is make their bed.
Yeah.
And I think that's powerful. And you've got to go very clear when, let's say, working with youth. It's not just make the bed, but to what level? Am I just pulling the sheets up to the top, or am I actually tucking them in to the point that I can bounce a coin on it? Right? It's the clarity of the expectation. But there's also a lot to be said about accomplishing things. Those little tasks or chores that are expected of us, brushing our teeth, did I or didn't I? Did I do it for 60 seconds, or did I just put toothpaste on and do it for 10 seconds? What are the clarities of the expectations and the joy of saying, I've done things today? This morning I made my bed. This morning I brushed my teeth. This morning I took a shower. You can actually now check off, I'm doing things, I'm accomplishing things. And in business, it's the same thing. What are we expecting of our employees that they can actually say they're contributing to the greater purpose of the business? And if you can feel a sense of purpose, belonging, that I'm valued, I'm needed, that's huge. And in a household, what better way to have every family member contribute to the household's well-being? As it relates to culture, we don't raise our voices. We don't throw things. I mean, there's a variety of things you can establish within the home these are the expected norms that we're going to establish, and everyone has to conform to them. I don't care who you are in the house. We don't do this. And honestly, some of the rules can be just crazy rules. On Mondays, we don't do this. On Sundays, we don't do that. Doesn't mean it's the right or the wrong way. It's just our way. How do you feel about those things?
Well, I'm picturing parents out there saying, yeah, I would love to be able to do all that. That sounds amazing, but they're overwhelmed.
Yes.
And it's like, how could I do that? Because I haven't really done all of that all the way through.
Baby steps.
Yeah, and so, I can see them going, oh, man, how do we do that? There are a few things I'd say is, again, divide them into categories of importance.
Very good.
Because if you're and it's not too late to begin now in some of these things. But tackle the big things, but do it in a really, really good way. One of the problems that we have as parents, if there's a real big issue and a big concern that we have, we want to create this huge, negative outcome if they mess that up. And what happens is the parent will probably never follow through with that threat. And so it never actually is an expectation because the consequence won't really follow. And number two, we should never create a consequence trying to keep a child from doing that negative behavior. A consequence is not meant to prevent all the time. It's just meant to teach. And so I've been guilty of it. I think most parents probably have. It's like, I'm gonna create a consequence that's going to prevent this from ever happening again. And it's just so counterproductive in the end. But if they create a consequence that teaches, they don't have to get all emotional and upset about it. They can just let the consequence follow, and you hope the lesson has been learned, and you move forward and try again. And you leave that space in there for choice. That's still really, really important.
Hugely important.
That they still need to be able to choose, and especially as they become more and more mature and at some point we want them to choose everything. We want them to become an adult and make all their choices. And so we're not trying to control the outcome. We're trying to teach along the way. And I think that's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah, and when you brought up consequences, one of the things that I think is hugely important is there's a perception that consequences are negative. Consequences are just the result of. It can be very positive. You can have
Yeah, it could be a
positive
positive
consequences.
consequence. Yeah.
So if you want to motivate and reward positively to enhance certain behaviors that you're wanting to see more of, that's just as appropriate.
There should be that.
Yeah. So in management or in the household, we want to be able to see, okay, these are things we want to celebrate and acknowledge and reward. Hey, thanks for doing that. Here's this. If we can do more rewarding of the positives, we're spending less time harping on the negatives.
And the reason I like that and should go first before the negatives is that the thing that we measure is the thing that we notice.
Yes.
And for a lot of parents, they're looking for the mistake
Mm-hmm.
or the time the expectation is not met. That's all they see. They don't really see all the times that things are going well, and then they're doing it well. It might be 10% of the time they're struggling, 90%. But what part of the actions do the parent tend to focus on? It's the painful one. And so it's really important that you define the positive outcome so that you're looking for it, so that you can reward that, and that's what you start to see. We can't attend to everything all at one time. We have to decide what we're going to notice and make sure you're noticing the good stuff.
So that brings us to communication. And I'm going to have this as a segue for communication because I believe in gratitude. Having a gratitude journal or starting the day where you're able to clearly list some of the things that you're grateful for, that puts you in a mindset where you start to be more aware. It's that confirmation bias. I'm noticing more
Yeah.
of the good around me. And as it relates to our employees or our children, our spouses, if we can be more attuned to the good they're doing and draw attention to what we like, that positive reinforcement basically gives them the endorphin of saying, I'm going to do that again. I like that acknowledgement. I want to do that again and again and again. And so as it relates to communication, how is communication so important in this journey to have an effective structure with family and business?
I'm going to make one comment before the communication piece, but it's very short, and the comment is you get what you focus on.
Yes.
And if you focus on the good, you're going to get more of it. And whether it's you're attending to more that's always been there, or that they are being reinforced and they like that, and so they're giving you more of that. And I think it's probably both in most cases. I remember we bought our little caravan way back when we had the kids, and I thought we had the only blue van on the road until I bought it, and then they're everywhere.
Yep.
Now I'm seeing them. They were always there, but now I see it. Communication. Again, a question about communication. Can you repeat
Well,
that
yes,
again?
I was wondering, we've talked about structure,
Yeah.
we've talked about expectations, but now it's the communicate that expectation.
Gotcha.
So for
Yeah.
me, in business, we have a principle that we say, pour on the communication. We talk about sprinkling it so that it's just through positive comments and in passing. There's something a little bit more structured. We talk about rain, where it's a little bit more consistent and deliberate in the sense that it might be a newsletter. It might be something that we're writing as a message. It's something that we acknowledge at a particular time. But then the last is the celebratory meeting. The meeting isn't a sprinkle and it's not the rain. The meeting is where we're deliberately in a specific way celebrating what someone's done. And so it might be the family reunion. I mean, many a times I've been to a family reunion and the aunts, the uncles, grandma, grandpa, they want to recognize, hey, did everyone know so-and-so just graduated? So-and-so just had a baby. It's acknowledging these milestones in our lives, and it's a very deliberate thing, and we do it in business. So-and-so is the employee of the month. So-and-so just got the record of the month for sales or whatever the case may be. And it's where we're not just sprinkling in the hallway in passing saying, hey, congratulations, well done. It's not just an email or a letter or a phone call where we're more intentional, but it's that meeting where we're actually trying to elevate them in front of everyone and give them the recognition that's due. So communication is a huge part of things.
Yeah.
And so you've got structure, you've got encouragement. What would you say about communication?
Yeah, I love it. Today, by the way, we have a meeting, speaking of communication, that's called the monthly parade, and at our company, and the kind of the mascot of our company is an elephant. And an elephant is the strongest mammal on the earth, land mammal. They they live a long time, they're wise, they have family units, they nurture each other. So we thought that's really fitting of our symbol of that. And if you don't have somebody in your company, in your organization who's thinking about communication and thinking about how do we connect and how do we celebrate and how do we do all these things, you need to get one because some of us are not naturally great at that. My wife is very good at this. And so I know that if she's involved in the meetings and in the culture, we're going to have things happen. She's going to remember people's birthdays. She is going to acknowledge wins inside the organization. And so she came up with this monthly parade, and that's what a group of elephants are called. It's a parade. I didn't know that. And so today we're going to be going through all the things we've accomplished as a company over the last month, and recognize all the team members who have helped contribute to that. And it's because of her that we're doing it. So I'd say, think about in your culture, who are the people that's got those natural tendencies to make sure that part of your culture is being communicated, that there's this intentional effort to connect the dots between our vision and where we're at today and how we're getting there and all of that. So that's huge.
I love what you're saying about the elephant and parade. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the analogy of you've got to, take a bite, and it's also, you want to, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? But it's also the idea of the blind people touching various parts of the elephant, and what's the trunk? It's a snake. What's the tail? It's and it's what are they looking at? The elephant, I think, has a lot of visual imageries that you can portray, and I like how you've incorporated it into your business. So that brings me to my next thing. With the troubled youth, with business, with family, there's this idea of having a team. You brought it up earlier that when the troubled youth was returning home, you wanted to actually build for them this team of support that they can draw on. It's the idea of you want to leverage the support of the village. You don't want to do it on your own. There's a lot of people that in running their businesses do it as single parents. They're trying to do everything, and it's a daunting challenge. There's so much that is weighing on them. There are admittedly a lot of things that get sacrificed as they're trying to be both a great parent and a great business person. In that process, how does village play into this? How does team play into this?
Roger, this is my favorite topic, by the way.
Okay.
I love this topic. I grew up in a really small town, as I mentioned, northeastern Utah. Everyone there knew my family, and therefore they knew me. And so I like to think of it as these, my daily life was intervened in multiple times by adults in my life and other people in my life because everybody knew me.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it sort of thousands of micro interventions in my behalf as I grew up. And it wasn't all my parents. It was a lot of outsiders that were doing this. And so people say I don't like small towns because they gossip. And I say I like small towns because they care enough to gossip, because they know each other.
They want to talk. Yes.
They want to talk. And so for the single parent, I can't think of a more difficult job, in the world really than a single parent that's got to play all the roles and wear all the hats and all of that. And so I just say, it's impossible to wear all the hats. And a lot of times, especially as our teens get older, they're open to outsiders in ways that they may not have been, and in ways they're not open to their parents anymore. And so to begin to identify who are the people in your circle that can have an influence in your child's life or in terms of supporting you personally so that you're not in this alone. And intentionally reach out. I know that might be uncomfortable, but if you're a little bit vulnerable and say, here are some of my concerns. These are the things I'm worrying about. And I'm wondering if you would be able to play a role naturally as a friend of ours or as a neighbor, as a coach to our son. If you could play a role just knowing a little more information than the average person would, what would you do differently as a result of that? So we'd put all these people together, and and have them welcome these teens home to take away any shame, to also create this warmth of welcoming. I don't know if you remember tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree.
Oh, yeah. We actually do it in our neighborhood.
Oh, do you?
We do.
And so there was that story. That song is about a guy coming out of prison, right? And he's so afraid that his girl is not going to want him back, and he can't bear to look. So he says, if you want me back, tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree.
Otherwise, I will keep going.
Yeah, I'll just stay on the train and keep going.
That's right.
And he didn't dare look, and he finally asked someone to look for him. He says, you need to look. There's not just one. There are 100 yellow ribbons around the old oak tree. And that's the kind of community and connection and feeling of love and belonging that all of us need. And in our world today that's so disconnected in so many ways, we have to, again, focus on deepening the relationships around us so that we can contribute to their life and they can contribute to ours. And we're all better off as we do that.
Yeah. No, the ribbon is very, very significant. In my neighborhood, we do have the ribbon, and it is tied around the trees quite regularly.
Oh, nice.
So there's youth that leave, and when they return home, it is done on their behalf. But similarly, we had a serviceman who died overseas, and the call went out to have flags put along the streets.
Oh,
And what you're imagining is, maybe a flag in front of every home.
yeah.
Every home had tens of flags there in the parkway as it was leading to the home. It overwhelmed the family as they were basically grieving the loss of their son. And yet here he comes, and everyone was acknowledging that loss. It was a big deal. So yeah, very significant. The whole village thing, I think it's hugely important. I do speak with many a business leader that unfortunately is trying to run a successful company while running a home. And when you get to speak with them, there are some guilts and regrets. And one of the things that I have seen that's helped them in that process is where they've opened up and leaned on others. And whether it's getting their children involved in extracurricular activities where they get to be part of a team, whether it's they're getting involved in scouting programs or, employment even, all of a sudden what happens is they're not alone in touching that child, and it becomes that influence of the 5 key people they're around. And if you can surround your youth with those influential people, they become amazing individuals.
Yeah, talk about early
incredible.
intervention strategies. That is a massive one. You made me think about a boy that came out of a wilderness program in Texas, and the mother was a single mom. Her husband had died in a plane accident, and this boy had become addicted to gaming, and he spent 10 hours a day plus doing it, and that's why he ended up in the wilderness program. But I said, I asked her, I said, I'm going to be visiting your home, and I'd like to have this gathering of people to kind of welcome your son home again. Would you be willing to invite a few people? And she was so nervous. And she says, I just, we kind of just pulled away when my son started struggling. We just sort of pulled back from everybody. And so I don't know what to do. And I said, trust me, they'll respond.
Yeah, put out the call.
Trust me. And I said, just do your best. So the day I got to her house, and it was the celebration was going to be the next night, I said, okay, so did you invite a few people? She said, yeah, I did. And I said, how many did you invite? She goes, about 40. And I said, awesome. She goes, but I'm sure most of them won't be able to come. Guess how many people came?
Probably more than 40, yeah.
They all came. And here's this boy, standing up in front of this group, and you've got the principal of his high school. You've got a junior high teacher that was a band instructor that really connected with him. You got extended family members, people from their church congregation. And there they are, massive, group of people stuffed into their front room. And he stands up and he speaks for 20 minutes about his pre-treatment, what life was like then, what was going on, what changed him in the wilderness program, what his goals were going forward. And he's looking at them in the eye. the principal raised his hand right at the end of that, and he said, first of all, I just want to say, you are amazing. He says, you spoke for 20 minutes without taking your eyes off us. I've never seen you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I just want to be a part of your future. I just want to help any way I can. And then I watched, I'm sitting back at the end of the night. This kid had no friends. They had a swimming pool out back. And before he left, he had no real friends. There he is. He's in the pool swimming with 3 or 4 kids who had come. He gets out of the pool, dries off. The band teacher pulls him over and sits down at the table outside. And there's like 5 others of those that were sitting at the table. And he's like, hey, your mom says that you need a passion before you can game again. You need some other passion that will take your time. He said, I've got an idea. He said, I've got an 8th grade class of kids that I'd like you to mentor in band. Would you be willing to do that? And he accepted that. And he ended up becoming really influential with these younger kids. And that became kind of a passion for him. And that was the meaningful thing in his life. And so then he could introduce a little bit of gaming, after that. But it was incredible to watch the response. And that's what I've seen over and over and again, thousands of times. Parents think, I can't ask because that'll be a burden to somebody, or they don't have the time.
Or we're putting a spotlight on something I
Yeah.
don't want to draw attention to.
Exactly, or they might judge us. And what they find out is every single one of those people struggle too.
Of course.
And that it could be a two-way street of support, and it's amazing. So it's my favorite thing. I can't think of anything I'd rather talk about.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that I'd like to draw attention to is the idea of service, where that young man obviously found purpose in that service.
Yeah.
When someone is experiencing self-pity and they're unable to take the spotlight in their own mind off of themselves, the best thing you can do is find a way to serve your fellow man. That selfless service is a way to find purpose, to find meaning, and more importantly, realize that your problems aren't as big as you perhaps perceive them to be. There are many others that have far more problems than you do. And that's very humbling. I've been in situations where it's been pretty dire. I mean, it's pretty problematic. It's troubling. And yet when you can open your eyes and look around, you'll realize there are people that have it far worse than you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you just a prime example, and I hope I don't get too emotional about this. My daughter just a few days ago had twins. My twins are in the NICU.
Mm.
So I've got my 2nd and 3rd granddaughters in the NICU. They're doing phenomenally well.
Good.
But they're in the NICU visiting with them, watching the nursing going on. They spoke of when my daughter and son arrived one day, there was a woman in there holding one of the babies.
Mm.
Well, in the hospital, there's a volunteer program where older people will come in, and as any babies are unattended and crying, they will come and hold them, love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how wonderful a program where these babies are getting that human nurturing that you spoke of earlier.
Oh, yes.
Well, where I want to go with this is a few days ago, there was images of, in Gaza, a parade of infants being carried through the hospital in a war zone, where these babies were being set side by side on a bed, having been born into that horrible situation. I could fixate on how sad it is that my daughter got discharged from the hospital and couldn't take her children home, that they were in the NICU. But clearly there are others that are dealing with far more than I am. And if you can get outside of yourself, you will recognize how blessed you truly are. And I think too often people wallow in their self-pity. And it's not to say it's not hard. I'm not trying to diminish what we all experience in life. I'm just trying to recognize that there are others that have it far worse, and we need to forgive the phrase, man up, pull up the bootstraps,
Yeah.
be grateful for what we do have and work with what we've got and move forward. And it's a far better way to look at life, in my opinion, than to be paralyzed by the situation. So that's an extreme
Mm-hmm.
situation. Clearly, I'm not experiencing war, but I can sympathize with that and be grateful for my situation. And that's how I choose to
Wow.
look at it.
Wow, what a contrast
Mm-hmm.
you've put out there, and it's true. And there is something paradoxical about forgetting ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and serving somebody else,
Oh, yeah.
and actually finding that's where we come to know ourselves better and have greater joy. I saw it over and over again. You know, most of our kids, and I remember being the same way as a kid when my dad say, "Hey, let's go shovel so and so's walk," or
Yeah.
let's go help a neighbor. I had 10 other things I would rather do, and every single time I've done that with my kids, and we've been out serving in some way together, big smiles at the end. We're just happy. We're just feeling more connected. We've just done something that matters, and so I agree. Service is such a undervalued and underutilized, uh, I think, preventative,
Mm-hmm.
measure to mental health problems. That if we could put ourselves in those positions more often, we'd really benefit, not just the people, but ourselves.
Hugely. Just you're sharing that example, I'm going to share one of mine as it relates to snow. There are two situations. I was raised on a hill, so outside our home was an incline where the snow would come and the cars would, in certain snowstorms, be unable to make it up the hill.
Yeah.
And here we are, children, my father, we're inside a nice warm home. And clearly, we could just, from the big spacious window that we have, just look out onto the street and watch these people struggle to go up the hill and laugh and point and just kind of chuckle at the situation.
Yeah,
And
front row seat.
yeah, front row seat. I was 25 feet from it. And here we are, in a situation where we could do different. And we did. We went out there, we put on our winter clothes, and with my dad, I went outside and we helped commuters go up the hill, numerous cars.
Yeah.
And the road was iced and they were getting stuck. And here you are with, families in a car, single riders, and, they're distraught. How do they can't do anything. They've got to drive up the hill. And it was congesting the traffic.
Yeah.
And here we are out there helping them get up the hill. I'm talking about this 30 years later.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because I remember the feeling of having made a difference. I remember the gratitude that the people had for me getting out of myself and helping someone else. Hugely. I'm a big proponent of service. Anytime you're wallowing in your situation, yes, wallow. Life is hard. It has its challenges, but okay, let me turn the spotlight off of you onto someone else. You want a situation? Go down to Primary Children's Hospital. Go down to the cancer clinic. Go down to the homeless shelter. Stop it. Get out there, serve. There are plenty of people that need your help, and you'll find that you have purpose in living and you can make a difference.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So true.
Very true. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I've got two more questions I want to ask. Clearly, Roxanne was helpful as you were running the business. At one point, one of the two of you came and said, "Hey, I've got this great idea. Let's start a business." And the other person probably wasn't the instigator, and they had to sit back and go, "Wow, that's a risk. That's a challenge. That's a sacrifice, but I'm going to support you. Clearly, this is important." Tell us about your entrepreneurial decision and how important the spousal support was in making that decision and having that happen.
That's a fun story for me looking back at this point. So we've never worked for anybody since college, and
Okay.
so I've always been an entrepreneur, and that's quite challenging for Roxanne because her dad was a professor at Northern Arizona. Summers off and 9 to 5 and steady and stable, and so She told me over time I've helped her develop a cast iron stomach because she had to get used to that feeling of risk. But there came a point in time, we had Homeward Bound, and it was sort of the steady cash flowing business that was doing really well. But all along I had this something inside me that wanted to create an app for families to help kind of take what we had been learning in the homes of these thousands of families that we'd worked with and put it in an app to try to help everybody. And so I went to her and I said, I got this idea. And I was braced because I knew she was going to be resistant. And she really shocked me. She says, okay, Tim, I'm going to listen to you about this idea, but I want you to first tell me, do you really need to do it? And that took me back. It's like, oh, I don't have to defend it or anything. I just have to be honest and check in with myself to see if I really need to do it. And I had this very strong feeling that something was inside me, like everything that we had done in our career had come to this point of this app. And I said, honestly, it feels like this idea needs to happen. And she goes, okay, then I will support you. Because she knew I actually really honestly answered it. And her support has been absolutely essential. I don't know where I would be without her. I think my kids all know, Dad's okay, but Mom is the real brilliance behind a lot of things. She's the one helping him do what he does. Mm-hmm. And she's just an amazing person. And you interviewed her, so I think that'll be out there and people can get what I'm saying when they get to see your podcast with her. But that support has been everything. And now I'm watching her kind of be the one in a lot of cases now. She's sort of turned into the entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting how we've kind of become like each other a little bit more, where I'm trying to support her in some things that she's doing as well.
That is wonderful. I think a lot can be accomplished when you have the support of whether it's a spouse or someone that is able to be your cheerleader and as things get hard, still say, no, I like your idea. Keep going. This is important.
Yeah.
So I think that's
even just today, she's like, she read a scripture and she's like, it says, a double-minded man is unstable. And she said, we can never say that we're not going to be successful. We can't even go there mentally because we're going to be. And so I've got her, helping me get the mindset that I need to keep going. And what an amazing thing that is.
Yeah. Let me ask about your children. They're grown. What do you hope that they have learned as they've witnessed you and Roxanne start the business, grow the business, see that entrepreneurial spirit? What do you think they've gained from this, especially having seen you work with troubled teens? I don't know how that affected your parenting, but...
Yeah. Oh, it affected it quite a bit. I was so worried about cell phones and smartphones and all of that. My kids were 17 before they got one.
That's probably not a bad thing, by the way.
Yeah. So it's been so fun to watch. We've got 5 kids, and it's been really fun to watch and a little frustrating, to be honest with you, because both my wife and I, had a lot of years of college, and that was sort of the idea in our mind. Okay, they're going to get into college and they're going to move forward. But on the side, we're really entrepreneurs. And I think that's what they picked up. They picked up the entrepreneurial side. Mm-hmm. And I just really I stand back kind of in amazement at this point of my kids, because at one point it was like, how do I teach them to work? And if you ask all my kids, like, what is your dad's number one thing that he's tried to teach you? They would all say to work hard.
Work ethic.
Yeah. And I think they have trauma over my desires for them to be hard workers. And I still picture myself, I still remember this so vividly, standing in our bedroom, looking out the window to the fall leaves on the ground, and my son, one of my sons, raking maybe 2 times, putting the rake down and texting. Then reluctantly pick up the rake again, and then down and text some more. And I'm sitting there going, Well, we got a milk cow in the middle of the city because cows need milked twice a day,
That's right.
no matter what, even on Christmas.
Yep.
And our kids will, to this day, they'll tell stories of me saying, "All right, get up, time to go milk the cow on Christmas morning."
Uh-huh.
And there's pride though in when they talk about this stuff. At the time, they thought I was, over the top, and in terms of work ethic and all of that stuff. But now, they have pride in the things they've done, the hard stuff they've done.
Yeah.
And they're good workers. They really work hard, and they've got this kind of spirit of entrepreneurialism, and all of them are kind of going that direction. And so it's really fun to watch them. Now they're sort of teaching me a lot of things. They've surpassed me in terms of marketing and things like that they're like, "Dad, we really want to help you, with this. We want you to be successful, and you need to change this. You need to do better at this thing." So it's kind of a fun little role reversal that's kind of happening right now.
I love it. I love watching our children grow and seeing what they choose to pursue and embrace. It's powerful, but some of these characteristics of work ethic, they start to play out, and it is part of the parenting that we've done. So that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
And honestly, as a parent, you don't know what they're learning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see later on what they actually glean from the whole parenting experience.
Right.
That is true. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this up and talk about a few things. But before we really go into this, I do want to talk about Trusty. Trusty is an app that you've created for families to actually help within the household. In the episode description, we're going to provide some information about it. But what can you say about the Trusty app that you mentioned a moment ago?
So the app is really taking all these years of experience and curriculum and processes, including things like setting expectations and communication and all of that, and putting it inside an app. One of the challenges we have as parents is that we get tired, or we get emotional, or we get angry, whatever it is, and we fail to be as good as we could be as a parent. And so what I see the Trusty app as is it's like having a parent coach in your back pocket that you can pull out, that's got notifications. It's going to remind you of what you need to do, and it's going to help you essentially be consistent in applying these true parenting principles within your family. I think about all the tools businesses have to be good at what they do in business. And we don't have that many technology products in the home to really work on the most important place that we could be doing that and being our best there. And so that's what the Trusty app is all about. And ultimately, hopefully this coming first quarter of the year, we're going to have like all of our functions of the app as it is now, tracking chores, setting expectations, setting goals, connected to apps on their phone. So as their trust score is high, the teens' trust score is high, and they got their chores done, it'll turn on some of the apps that they're allowed to have. Because we're sort of combating the world of technology and the
Lots
apps.
of noise.
There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of mental health issues because of that. And we want Trusty to help manage that so that parents aren't the bad cops saying, "Give me your phone, I'm going to shut that off." We're going to make that more automatic.
Love it. Love it. Well, first of all, for the listeners, go to the episode description, and in the description, you'll find more information regarding the Trusty app, and there you'll get the information you need in order to check it out and perhaps subscribe to it. The intent is to give you a structure in which you can have a more meaningful relationship in your family. You can actually set clear expectations, manage those expectations, clearly communicate, obviously, amongst everyone that's participating. All of these things are enabling you to be better at the parenting, much like you are in your business. And I think that intentional effort is what's going to pay off. So definitely check out the Trusty app there in the episode description. In addition, I'm going to be putting some information in the episode description of various other tools and resources that you might be interested in or may consider using as you're looking at how to be both that business owner, that entrepreneur, and at the same time that wonderful parent that we all need to be. The other thing that I want to point out is kind of a summary of what it is that we had discussed today. Really enjoyed the conversation with Tim. Dr. Thayne has been very insightful as to what the correlation between business and family life really is. And honestly, whether it's the culture we have in the business or the culture we've created within our home, those things are things that really impact what's going to be accomplished, what we're doing. And as we're running our businesses or being parents, we clearly want to strive and be the best that we can be. So as he was sharing different insights as it related to structure, creating that setting, that organization within the family, household, or in the business, I really resonated with that. I also thought the idea of having clear expectations is important. Something that's quantifiable, something that is black and white, you did or didn't do it, is something that's very helpful in the communication so as to know what is expected of someone. And then communication, just the idea that we have that open dialogue that's happening. And then lastly, I thought what was very important was the idea of team, finding those different resources, organizations, groups that we can lean on as we're both parenting and also running our businesses so as to enable us to not feel as if we're alone. No, there's no reason to believe that we're in this by ourselves. And so I think those were some excellent insights that we could draw from. And then lastly, this Trusty app, definitely check out that and see what it is that it might be able to contribute to your household. So with all those things, let me come back to you, Tim. What final thought might you have for everyone?
Wow, first of all, I want to thank you. This has been an amazing experience for me. I feel like I'm learning as much as you may be learning. So appreciate that opportunity to be here. And I guess I just circle back to maybe my initial statement, and that is that I hope that this conversation between us has helped people identify the things that are most important in their life and how that will move the needle in all aspects of their life. And that is their ability to connect with other people and to deepen those relationships and to create that network of support around you and your family. And I'd say to prioritize it, because we often will leave the family stuff a little bit to, hey, we had babies, we have a family, we must be doing it right, and we're less intentional in that setting than we could be. And I just encourage us to make that as much or more intentional there than we would be even at work.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely tell you that in the world of accounting, this isn't typically one of the conversations that comes up. Generally, people want to talk about onboarding clients or something that might be related to what they can do to actually grow the business or work more efficiently. Clearly, topics that we address here on this podcast, but obviously, this is something that I was looking forward to discussing because this is something that we all deal with, I believe, on a very personal level. And so I'm happy we had this conversation. It is something that is related to other discussions I've had in the past as they relate to mental health, mental awareness. And so when running a business, I think this is something that we just need to naturally be discussing. There's a lot of talk of therapy and medication, and a lot of people are doing that now. It's definitely a lot more common, but clearly there's a rise in depression and anxiety and so forth. So let's at least open the line of communication and have this dialogue. So with that being said, let me just encourage you on this front. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, I invite you to definitely do so. We do have a variety of playlists that you can go to at universalaccounting.com. In the podcast section, you can literally see highlights. It's where we've put together a collection of playlists that you can see various topics as they relate to your business, whether they are marketing or sales or onboarding clients or tech stacks. Definitely go there and see what is relevant to your current situation and take advantage of those playlists and binge listen to those. But likewise, in the subscription, definitely set your announcements or your notifications so that you get notified each and every week when we release a new episode. The other thing I wanted to point out is with regards to the podcast is if you are interested in joining us for GrowCon, I clearly want to invite you to join us every year for the conference wherein we have basically on stage the experts to speak to us as owners of bookkeeping, accounting, and tax businesses, things that we need to be aware of in order to have what I refer to as the premier accounting firm, offering quality services, taking care of our clients, getting paid what we're worth. Come and join us for GrowCon so that you can actually hear from the experts. Likewise, you can also interact and visit with your peers, make connections with individuals like you that are literally on the forefront of starting, building, and running successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax businesses. Meet your peers, collaborate with them, build connections and relationships with those individuals doing just as you are. And then lastly, at GrowCon is clearly the team here at Universal Accounting. Meet us, get to enjoy us, and most importantly, make connections with myself and the others. Why? So that you can be in business for yourself, but not by yourself with Universal Accounting Center. So definitely take advantage of joining us for GrowCon. We're excited to meet and have you there. So register now for GrowCon. The other part of this is clearly if you have any interest in these topics, discussions that we have on the show, if you'd like to discuss them further, reach out to us. You can contact us at 801-265-3777, or you can visit us online at universalaccountingschool.com. So with all that being said, thank you for listening. This has been a wonderful episode, and I invite you to not only remember, but realize accounting success is universal. Take care, have a great day, and be safe out there.